City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded Monday, February 11, 2019.
Okay, we'll call the Stevens Point Finance Committee to order at 7:14. No, 7.
7:17.
Yeah, let's go 7.
17.
And you took a roll call?
You
So
bet.
we're all set?
We're set.
Good. First item on the list is a presentation of the Tax Increment Financing, TIF, by Corey. So we'll just let you go.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. So I've been asked for a little bit more information about tax incremental financing as far as how it works. And then also, do we know that it's successful and what's the local impact of TIF financing? So to an extent, this is a follow-up on the Plan Commission presentation. We had someone from Ellers talk a lot about the mechanics of TIF. I want to talk a little bit about the impact on the city of Stevens Point and also sort of its results in Portage County. So where I'd like to start is, a lot of times when we look at something, we need to keep in mind what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? And with TIF, the issue that we're trying to solve, or the problem, is that we're very reliant on property taxes to fund local operations, not just for the city, but the county and the school district and the tech colleges as well. For the city's operating budget for 2019, property taxes make up 54% of the revenue. So that's something that we're very reliant on. One thing to note, this is excluding special revenue funds and also EMS. And then if you look at the other pieces of our budget, we have state aid that makes up 31%, and of course that's very limited. The state is not getting more generous with revenue. The overall trend there has been downward, so that, really hard to do much with expanding that piece. And then we do have about 15% that's basically everything else: permits, licenses, fines, investment revenue, that sort of thing. And of course that's a smaller piece. We do our best to grow this as well, but there aren't always a lot of opportunities. So the property tax piece is really important. That's really what funds local services. And I think it's also important to understand that we don't get any portion of sales taxes or income taxes. So, a lot of times when we're talking about what should TIF accomplish, should it be jobs? Should it be this? Should it be that? Well, first and foremost, the most important thing, if we're focused on our budgets and our ability to fund local services, is to grow property tax revenue. So that's really why we need to maximize the property tax base that we have as much as possible and continue to grow it. What's the impact of property tax base on a community? I'll give you one example. A community that's been in the news lately is the city of Merrill. And the city of Merrill has a very high tax rate. In fact, their municipal tax rate is 49% higher than the city of Stevens Point's. So this budget season, ours is $9.65. I have theirs down at $14.38 for the municipal portion. So their budget process this year, they had some angry people who are finally upset, fed up with the amount of taxes that they're paying. So I looked at their situation, looked at their budget, was trying to figure out, okay, what is this? Why are they paying so much? Do they spend that much more money than we do? And what I found when I looked at them is that as far as property tax base per capita, they have 39% less value per capita than we do. And that right there explains a big part of that difference. And you think about it, that's really an unfortunate situation for your community to be in, because essentially you're paying more, the remaining taxpayers are paying 49% more, but yet you might not really be getting better services. You might not be getting 49% better services. It's just that you don't have that tax base to support that. So what we want, of course, is to be a community with strong property tax base, which helps to fund the services that people want at a reasonable tax rate. And I think that's really the goal. And whatever we do, whether it's TIF, whether it's something else, that's why we want to grow property tax base as much as we can. So how can we do that? How can we accomplish that? You know, can tax incremental financing help, and what does that look like? The way that I look at TIF is really we need a mechanism to make an investment to increase property tax base. And sometimes there are those opportunities where we can make an investment to do that. And then the revenue that's generated, that investment can generate revenue, and basically we want to use that revenue to repay that initial investment. It's kind of the chicken and the egg dilemma. You know, maybe you don't have any money because you don't have the property tax base, and then you can't really make those investments to create the property tax base because you don't have any money to do it. So the point of TIF is sort of to try and break that cycle. And I really like this graph, and what this demonstrates as far as the overall concept is basically you have your initial creation of the TIF district here, where you have your base values and you have the amounts that are going to each taxing jurisdiction, the county, schools, tech college, the municipality. And the point is really that you make an investment. That investment creates more revenue. The existing revenue that you had before continues to each jurisdiction, and then that new money that you have goes to repay your initial investment that you maybe made back here, and then eventually, hopefully you get to the end of that TIF district, you can close that TIF district, you've recovered the initial investment, and then each taxing jurisdiction should get a larger slice of the pie. And that's really how it's supposed to work. That's how it's supposed to happen. One thing to note is that all of the risk on this is on the municipality. So if the increment is not recovered, or if the initial investment is not recovered, then of course you're going to have the municipality eating that cost. Now, if there's money left over, on the other hand, if that would get split with each taxing jurisdiction, because it really is a cooperative effort of all the jurisdictions to say, how can we work together to increase the property tax base so that everybody benefits. So that's kind of the overall concept as I see it. And then I also took a look at what really are the results in Portage County, because you say, okay, this is supposed to generate property tax base. Does it really accomplish that? And we should be able to show that this tool is effective. And I know a lot of times I hear, well, won't growth just happen on its own? And it's a fair question. So took a look at some data. I took all 27 municipalities in Portage County. Out of the 27, 5 of them use tax incremental financing. You've got the city of Stevens Point and Village of Plover with 5 TIF districts each. You've got 2 in the Village of Amherst, 1 in Whiting, 1 in the Village of Junction City. And I looked at a 5-year period, and I looked at growth due to net new construction. And here's what I found. The 5 municipalities that use TIF districts, the average net new construction per year over the 5-year period was 1.8% per year. For the non-TIF municipality average, basically the other 22 municipalities that don't use TIF districts, their average was 0.9%. So you can see a pretty significant difference there. Really, it's double. And the other thing to note is this has a huge impact on the operating budget and what we have to work with in terms of those operating dollars, because basically the other thing that this is telling you, since the growth in your property taxes for operations are restricted to only net new construction is that the 5 municipalities would have averaged 1.8%, which you can make that work. You know, that's at least a reasonable number to deal with inflation. For the non-TIF municipalities, this is pretty tough. The 0.9% really is not enough to keep up with inflation, and that's going to be a continual challenge for those municipalities that don't see a lot of growth. Then I also, just out of curiosity, sometimes it's nice to look at numbers a couple of different ways. I wanted to see how does the city of Stevens Point compare to the other 4 municipalities that use TIF. Basically, the city of Stevens Point was at 1.94% over the 5-year period, and then the other 4 are 1.6, if you look at that. And then just to look at numbers in a lot of different ways, categorized, a few different ways. Basically, the average for all municipalities in Portage County, you take all 27, put them together, 1.39%. Like I showed you before, you break those into TIF and non-TIF. You have the 0.9 for the non-TIF municipalities, the 1.8 for the TIF municipalities, and then if you break up the TIF municipalities, you have 1.6 for the 4 excluding the city, and then 1.94 for the city of Stevens Point.
Do you have,
Yeah, go ahead.
do you have the breakdown of each municipality?
I do.
All right.
I do, and I figured you would ask for that, so I'll show you the breakdown and the ranking, and because I figured, people are going to be curious to see the sort of the data and how the ranking goes. And I do want to note that this is really just to look at growth patterns, and we're not trying to put anyone down here or anything, but it is to kind of see, okay, who has some successful strategies that are working. So basically, out of the 27, the city of Stevens Point would be in number 1 with 1.94, and then Village of Plover would be number 2, 1.78, and then Village of Amherst number 3 at 1.73. So out of the 27 municipalities, 5 of them use TIF districts, and TIF municipalities basically have the top 3 spots. And then going down the list, you have some other municipalities. You do have Junction City is a TIF municipality. They only have 1 TIF district. They're fairly far down on the list. And then as you get to the end, Village of Whiting, actually. And one thing to know, okay, well, what's going on there? Because they have a TIF district too, what's happening. But you have to remember, this number is net new construction. So what that means is that when the state does this number, they subtract out demolitions. And during the 5-year period, they did have a large paper mill get demolished. So of course, that's kind of an extenuating circumstance. But certainly that puts them down, as far as in that place, which honestly, you would probably expect to happen, especially considering the size of the municipality and the size of the taxpayer that they lost. So, just a couple of concluding thoughts about it. One is I think the data does show that TIF can be a useful tool to stimulate growth of the tax base. That doesn't mean that every single TIF strategy is right. That doesn't mean that every single development or potential use of TIF money is wise, but that we can see that there is at least some value in using the tool in certain ways. I also think that it is valuable to influence the development pattern overall. I know we talked a lot last year about maximizing tax base per acre, and certainly that's an important component, and that's something that with being able to use TIF, we're able to have a little bit more influence as far as how the community develops. And basically, we want the community to develop in a way where we have developments that produce more in revenue than what they cost us in expenses for services. And also, we need to remember that really when it comes down to it, we do have a fairly limited land area to work with. We really, we have room to expand to the east, but we really don't have a lot of places to expand in other directions. So we do need to look at, okay, the area that we have to develop and the current sites are very, very valuable, and we want to be wise with how we use that. And then also, I think this is really important, is that TIF still needs to be used wisely, and certainly like any tool, there's a right way to use it and a wrong way to use it. There's a reckless way to use it, and something that I think, and I know Michael and I discuss a lot and have worked on very hard, is to manage the risk associated with TIF districts, to make sure that if we're doing development agreements, we're covering the city against potential risks and using a variety of strategies to do that. So was just a quick presentation on some of what I found as far as how TIF has worked over the last 5 years in Portage County and the difference that it makes. And I guess I'd take any questions or.
Questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Corey. Interesting. As always, I find these things just incredibly interesting. So when we're at 1.9% net new development, that we're just kind of keeping up with inflation.
Yes.
Falling a little bit behind, but still
Yes.
just keeping up with inflation. So, and the other thing, and I don't think people realize this, is this committee and this council has evaluated a number of proposals brought forward by staff. And when you talk about using it wisely, this committee and this council rejected some of those. And I won't go into detail, they were all closed session, but there was a degree of caution on either staff's part or the council felt that it just wasn't a good fit for
Yeah.
Stevens Point.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of times the public doesn't really see. They don't see that side of it. They don't see sort of the side of the negotiations as well, where the developer asks for things and we say, no, we can't do that. So, and they also don't see the developments where the developer walked away because we wouldn't give them, everything that they wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Corey, one other thing I wanted to point out that you had on the very first slide is the amount of state aid. And I remember that amount keeps going down
yes.
each and every year. I think you made a comment that the amount of state aid that Stevens Point is getting now is the same it was getting like in 1996 or something like that. And that trend just keeps going down and down. And the municipalities have got to find ways to try to make up for that cost, as opposed to just trying to put it all on the local taxpayer.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a huge issue, is the state of kind of where we're at with state aid, and creates a real budgetary challenge, and also, creates a situation where, we need to create that additional tax base so that it doesn't all fall on, the existing taxpayers.
Sure. Alderperson
One other-
Nabel, you had, wait a minute,
I had a
follow-up?
follow-up. One thing I think that you also brought up too is a lot of folks don't know that the sales tax does not stay here.
Yes.
So a lot of people think, all right, I'm paying my sales taxes for gas, food, and everything else, and that goes to the state. It
Yeah.
doesn't even go to us.
And that is something that, the county does get a small portion, but the municipality gets no portion of the sales tax. And that actually is unique. There are a lot of states where the municipality does get a portion. I know that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities has been working on this, and one of the issues that they have is that the funding for municipalities is very, very narrow in Wisconsin. So it relies almost exclusively really on the property tax, and that creates an issue, that maybe it would be better to have a broader base of revenue sources than just limited to property taxes.
Alderperson Nabel has a question?
If you want.
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
You have to go up there.
People on the radio will want to hear your question.
Oh, great. Cindy Nabel,
All
District,
three of them.
yeah, all three of them, District 3, 1100 Phillips Street. I know we're talking about financing, and I think this still does connect with financing. So I'm not as concerned about TIFs. I'm concerned on exactly what you said on what we do decide to invest in and make these decisions on. And I do have some concerns. It's hard not to. Concerns with, are we oversaturating the market, is something we really have to look at. And I don't want this not to be discussed, because I think it's very important, after living somewhere for 40 years and seeing the value of property that homeowners and landlords that own properties, if our values, we're paying more and more taxes in town compared to other districts that have 1 to 2 acre lots. We're paying more taxes on per square property. And we're not getting the new streets. We're not getting, we're still living within our means of what we have in our city. If we have too many apartment units and it gets to be oversaturated, what then happens to the market? So yes, the concerns I have to look at for those people that already, we have so much that's already not owner occupied here, that is rental. That 51, 53%, what happens to the value of those places when there's a big amount of them that aren't kept up? And so now they don't have the people to stay in their places. The kids students, for example, maybe want the more expensive one, will go there if they can afford it. So what happens to our neighborhoods that we've been fighting about so much about improving and having houses that people could buy and redevelop it? But how do they turn over when what happens is your neighborhood already has, more than half of it is not in good repair already? That it has run down so much that only the few people that have been holding it up, and I'm one of them, for so many years, and would put things into our houses, and our values have gone down. We're not a business, so we're not making more money on our house and living in it. But the people that have rented them out, maybe they did make some money, maybe they haven't, maybe they've come out even. But what's going to be left for the people that are going to rent? If they have to go lower, there's two choices the rental properties have.
Cindy, we're getting way,
But it has to do with borrowing money and what we're investing in, and this is about investing. And I want this to be, it's an important conversation. What happens to those apartment units or houses, especially houses in our neighborhoods, as they now have to either charge lower rent to compete? And everybody'd say, good, finally, right? Well, does that mean they're going to be able to put more money into their places, or would they then have to add more people into those places? What type of people are we going to be getting in our neighborhoods compared to the students we've had? It's something to think about. There is a element of people aren't taking care of the property to begin with. You get lesser quality of students. The lower that the quality of the places, the apartment, I have seen that those are the students or the renters that don't care. They don't take care of places. The better places get the better students. If they got a good landlord, they're going to get good students living there. I'm afraid about the ones that I do have around me that are good landlords, and that what happens when they aren't able to rent that, or these places end up sitting empty because if we're oversaturated.
Cindy, again, I think we're just complaining about the landlords not.
I'm not complaining about the landlords. I'm
Talking
thinking,
about a TIF district
we have a
here.
53% in our city that are already rentals, and those that don't live in the inner part of the city may not even see it, but it's already had its issues. How do we do what our property values go down further because people are living in the newer areas of new apartments, and then
Okay, I think you
it
made your point.
falls apart.
I think you've made your point.
Point of order, what Alder Nabel is referring to is tied into which I hope will be next steps, and it's a strategic plan for the city, which kind of brings all of that full circle. And I know Director Ostrowski is working on that RFP, and so some of those things will come out in that, I believe.
Sure.
So are we overextending ourselves in some of the TIFs? Comes down to how much more of our TIFs are going to go to living spaces rather
The
than
property
businesses.
values are appreciating, right?
We shouldn't
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
Okay. So my concern is that we also have to look at the other side of it, of what happens to when these places are empty, what then?
So the question you have for Corey, are we over the top on apartments in
Yeah,
the city?
are we being oversaturated? Where are the numbers
I
on
think that's a
that?
Michael question, not
It is.
Corey.
It can
Well,
be, but.
Corey or Michael could probably answer that.
Isn't
Director
that kind of
Ostrowski?
off the subject of our?
Yeah, they
Okay.
probably
It's not really
and-
not on the agenda, right?
Well, I guess
And-
it does pertain.
So I guess just a quick follow-up on that, and yeah, I didn't intend to talk about a specific development agreement necessarily with this or specific development, but one thing that I did want to note, a nice tool that's been added to TIF districts as well, is that now you can actually extend a TIF district for an additional year and use that increment for housing. And you can actually use that anywhere within the municipality. So for instance, if we close out, for instance, TIF District 7 is scheduled to close out in 2028, we keep it open an extra year, we can use that increment specifically for housing to address some of the issues that are out there. And then, and that can be used anywhere in the city. That's correct. That's correct. So, and that's a really nice feature as well, and I think it goes back to that whole point about, trying to make an investment to really increase your property tax base and increase what you have. And so that's a feature as well to address some of the other issues that might be outside of a specific TIF district and that might be more residential property related rather than commercial property. So, and that's something that, granted, it'll take some time to get there, but as far as an overall plan, we've set aside some money already, a fairly significant amount for some redevelopment programs. So, the plan, I guess, is to stretch that out until we get to where we're closing out some TIF districts, and then we have that funding source to keep sort of a continuity of redevelopment. So,
Thanks, Corey. Any more questions for Corey? See none? Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
okay, thanks.
Okay, next item on the agenda is capital relocation request from Transit. Director Lemke, are you here? We had a memo in here asking, kind of know what it's all about. He must have took,
Joe's-
aha. Director, maybe we'll have some questions about your memo here? I don't have any, but do you need do any more explanation, or? Everybody read it? Alderperson Shore.
Thank you, Chair. That reallocation made a lot of sense to me. The next item, the Public Works reallocation, also made a lot of sense to me. Like the managers are being good stewards of the budget.
Absolutely.
And it left me with the question, when is our decision needed? I mean, maybe that's a matter of statute, but, those just struck me as good management of the budget. And so I'm glad to know about them. But the question occurred to me of why, of what sorts of reallocations our approval is needed.
Well, on the transit one specifically, those items were budgeted with specific destinations for those dollars. In the case of the $445,000, that was local share of buses. In the case of the $50,000, that was for cameras and other related equipment. And now both of those combined are going to be less than that, to the tune of $50,822. And since what we're proposing to spend it on isn't what it was approved for, that's why we're asking for permission to spend it on something else.
So when it moves to something different.
Yeah.
How old is that building?
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Any other questions? You have motions?
I'll talk to him after.
Sure.
Gonna make a motion.
Yes.
Excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion, I am sorry, to approve the transfer of the unspent capital dollars for the new buses and camera and reallocate them towards the HVAC recommissioning project.
Okay, and to the amount of, should we include that amount in there? And,
I mean, I think the memo's in the
Yeah.
packet that explains it.
Okay.
so.
As described in the package.
Sure.
Air
Thank you.
handling,
Seconded
Yeah,
by
the makeup air.
Alderperson Shore? Yep. Questions, comments? No more discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Item 3 is capital relocation request from the Department of Public Works. That would be Director Badoon? You had a thing in here about it? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll move to approve the capital reallocation request from the Department of Public Works. I think his memo explained it
Yeah.
very well.
Yep.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I'll move to approve it.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Alderperson. Okay. Questions, comments?
I have one comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to recognize that, thank Director Badoon and his staff for thinking about the garage, or I think it was the salt shed at the Streets Department, especially in light of our discussion of whether we're going to have a long-term presence at Buchholz Park, and I appreciate that they took the great effort to repair the shed without having to spend a lot of money and are able to reallocate this money. So thank you for that.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the comment. Did we vote on this already? No, we didn't vote on this. So we had a second by, what's down here? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, item 4, funding for energy efficient projects. Corey, maybe you could,
Yes, so, certainly energy efficiency is something that's important for managing the operating budget and keeping our cost structure down. And we had originally set a goal of spending at least $50,000 a year on energy efficiency projects. We had that through the long-term capital plan that we did several years ago. However, unfortunately, as we know, the capital budgets have been tight, and it's been tight to be able to get that money in there for that purpose. So trying to think of, okay, how can we find some other ways to fund this, because it is something that our departments do tell us that their biggest challenge or barrier when it comes to energy efficiency is just the funding to do these projects. So from 2018, we had $31,130 left in our building maintenance capital line item, which that line item is really for unexpected repairs and things that come up related to facilities. We don't always have that much left over, but 2018 was a decent year for unexpected repairs. So what I would suggest is maybe what we could do is take that $31,000 and say, okay, we want to use this for energy efficiency, and then throw that out to the departments to really look for what could their best projects be, whether that's LED lighting, whether it's, HVAC upgrades, whatever it happens to be, put those forward, and then we can use that money to fund the projects that basically have the best bang for the buck as far as the quickest payback, or if they accomplish other needs. So that's kind of the thought process. And then I'd also note that the staff has, in various departments, have worked quite a bit with Focus on Energy with quite a bit of success. And they've been a really helpful partner as far as to help evaluate facilities, identify some of the easiest improvements to make. And then they've also been helpful as far as getting us rebates and incentives to help cover that initial investment and put toward it as well. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Corey?
I have a question. I think it's a great idea. Have we ever done, I know you said you're working with Focus on Energy, but to understand the impact of investment in energy, our energy savings, do we have an energy audit so that we have a baseline so that if we do some of these things, we can have a better understanding on the return on investment?
Sure. I know that the fire department specifically,
Yeah.
they did an LED upgrade, and I believe that the chief might, I believe he did look at the impact there, so I don't have it in front of me. And then I also know, actually, Director Schrader did a lot of stuff with the Willett Arena, and I think was able to, I don't know if either of you want to speak to kind of your projects that you did?
I believe in the fire department, between the new windows, the LED lights, the timers, the green hinges at the door, our energy bills in the last 2 years have dropped by about 1/3. You know, about 30%.
Thank you. Tom?
I know the stuff we've done at the Willett over the last 15 years, WPS said we probably have a 40 to 45% increase in the cost of utilities at that building. And now with the whole new refrigeration system, we'll see a decrease. But that's another building, we really want to look at LED lighting in it. We have T5s in there now, but LED is so much more efficient, so.
Thank you. Thanks.
Alderperson Sharp?
Thanks. I just thought I'd mention, because Alder McComb and I are working closely with the mayor on very similar lines, as, you know, as part of our Green Tier Legacy Communities effort. And what we want to do is develop a system of spreadsheets to capture not just specific major improvements where you can sort of, you know, go from this action to this effect, but to watch energy use in buildings and vehicle fleets just throughout the entire city operation, and track what's going on. So that's a project we're working on right now.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? Comments?
You want that in the form of a motion as a new policy?
Yes, I would. Oh, one question I have for Corey. When you figure these amounts that they had in there, and they had a contract that was under budget, but in a lot of these contracts, there's a contingency stuck in there. Is that including a contingency amount?
Okay, well, for this one, this capital line item is a little unique as far as where the money was left over, because basically, it's $50,000 a year that we put in our capital budget, and we've been doing it every year for as long as I've been here. And basically, it's not allocated to a specific project. What it is for the facility issues that come up that weren't expected and weren't budgeted for. So it's almost more like a contingency account.
Okay.
You know, it's for when the furnace dies or the boiler goes, or,
Yep.
you know, the roof starts leaking and we hadn't planned on that.
Okay. Thank you. So we need a motion to move forward with this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve a policy, standing policy, that would allocate remaining funds from the building maintenance account to energy efficiencies as outlined in the memo.
I second that.
Thank you. Alderperson Morrow, seconded. Got that? Everybody understand the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Okay, number 5, this is a development agreement relating to the property at 1017 3rd Street, parcel number, yada, yada, yada. Director Ostrowski. I'm sure maybe we'll have some questions about it. I don't think so, but
Sure, I can give a quick run-through real quick. Is that all right? Or-
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So this is relating to the development on the former Lullaby Furniture site, North Side Yard. This is the site just located on the north edge of our downtown between the denser downtown and the single-family neighborhood to the north. As many of you seen at various meetings already. Here's the site diagram with two four-story buildings on the southern edge of the site, mixed-use buildings with commercial storefronts on the first floor, and then residential's 2, 3, and 4. A residential building on the northwest part of the site, and then 11 townhomes bordering the north. This is a quick site plan of what the site would look like as proposed, keeping that commercial courtyard entryway through the southern part of the site all the way up to connecting to Meadow, really aligning that parking on the inner portion of the site, and then surrounding the site with several of the buildings, and also including residential courtyard between Building 1 and Building 2. Just a few renderings of what was approved at the Plan Commission and the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission this month. And these would be the townhomes on the northern edge of the site. So with this agreement, I'll go through the principles in terms of the developer, the city, and then the redevelopment authority, since it is a three-party agreement. Developer would agree to construct Phase 1. They'd start on Phase 1 no later than December 31st of this year. Phase 1 would include the 2 four-story mixed-use buildings on the southern edge of the site. Those buildings would need to be completed by September 30th, 2021. And then Phase 2 would need to be completed by December 31st, 2022. In terms of the value, Corey had mentioned a lot about value with these developments. The developer would need to guarantee a minimum value of $20 million by January 1, 2022. Also then by the end of the start of 2023, that value would need to be at $25 million. And then the $25 million would need to remain through the term of the agreement to receive all of the incentives that are being proposed. The city's obligation would be to provide a $3 million incentive upfront, and that would be provided after the development is completed for Phase 1, so they need to be able to occupy the buildings before that development incentive is released. If those buildings don't hit $20 million for the first phase, the development incentive would be prorated based off of the percentage that it would hit. The second part of the incentive is that if the development then reaches $25 million by the time frame indicated, they would receive 100% of the increment back to them through 2041. The increment would be minus the debt service that we would need to cover the incentive payment for the upfront incentive. And then the RA's obligation would be to sell the land to them at $1. The RA will be meeting tomorrow to discuss this as well. And just quickly here, talking a little bit about value, we did put this together just to kind of give you an indication of how this value plays out. Typically looking at the inner core of the city being of highest value per acre is typically what we see. Our downtown core has about just over $1 million per acre. You can see on the top here within this downtown core area. As we move to the north transition area, you can see that value drops pretty significantly, largely because we've got a tax exempt entity in there. We've got a lot of parking lots and a very, it's not so dense within this north transition area. As we shift to 1017 3rd Street with the proposed development, we'd be looking at just about a $6.3 million per acre value, which would be far surpass any of our inner core city areas downtown.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Michael. For the release of $3 million, you said when Phase 1 is occupied, does that mean the retail and residential?
So it's when the Phase 1 of the buildings are complete and ready to be occupied. Not necessarily all tenant improvements concluded, but when the building main component of it is been signed off for a final inspection through our building inspection department. Not all tenant spaces are going to have a tenant in there, or the residential units are not going to have a tenant in there, but the units would be finished. Some of the tenant uses or finishes will be like a white box scenario until the tenant locates there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
So, I guess I'm just not real familiar with, assessments and stuff as far as, how does a vacancy affect the value? okay, we're, say they do phase one, and it's, what was it, 20 million? What generates the 3 million, $20 million
Correct.
value? If those are not occupied or vacant, is that gonna affect that value and bring it down? I mean, we're paying this 3 million, one lump sum.
We're paying the upfront incentive with one lump sum. So
And
for example, if, let's say the buildings came in at 10 million, it'd only be a $1.5 million incentive. So depending on what that value
At the
is.
time, I mean, so
At the
that's
time.
basically that assessment is based on a vacant building. It's just a structure.
Go ahead.
So when you're talking property assessments, there's a couple different approaches to value. If you had a long-standing building, then you could look at what's called an income approach, and you can see what the trend has been in terms of the rent that the building is actually generating. With brand-new commercial construction, typically you're looking at the cost that went into building it.
Okay.
Then, of course, you can also look at just market value and comparative sales. But with this, you'd probably be looking mostly at the cost, the replacement
Construction.
cost, basically.
So, I mean, and I'm just concerned if there's any risk about that value dropping. Once we give them that lump sum, then, although, I mean, we're just another year later is when they have to have phase two done, where it's gonna boost.
Sure, and I guess as far as covering that risk, that the assessment would change or that the valuation would change, so they'd have to hit at least the $20 million to get the 3 million.
Yeah.
And then, basically, the amount of value that we need to cover the debt service payment on that is $11,425,000. So, let's say the assessment would drop by $5 million, we would still be covered on our debt service
We'd
payment.
still have an increment.
Yep, so basically, we do have some cushion there. So that helps sort of cover that potential risk.
We're not like all in.
No.
No, it would be different if we, we're planning on the value of 20 million and we were giving everything up front and we needed a full $20 million in value to make the debt payment. Then that would be, a lot more risky. This is protects the city a lot better just because if the value drops, we would, at that point, give them less of a
Okay,
pay-as-you-go incentive.
Yep.
You know.
thank you.
Any more questions?
I'm good.
Okay.
One last quick comment about what the value that Corey just referenced, the 11.425. If you look at section 4.1 sub 6, there's actually sort of a secondary level of protection there too, which is that
What was it?
4.1 sub 6.
Okay,
The developer is guaranteeing an amount of revenue that would be generated based on a valuation of that amount. And if it were to drop below that, they have to make that up with what's called a differential payment. So they would pay their taxes, but then they'd pay us an additional amount on the basis of the contract.
okay.
So I'll ask you a question. Is it a pretty good deal?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, the city can afford to do this?
Yes.
Okay. Another question?
No. This property's been sitting empty for a long time. And I think this is an awesome development. I do really think that this is kind of continue to move the downtown area, in the positive direction. So I will move.
Oh, yes,
I mean, I'm
he can
just
make a
making a
motion,
motion.
then we can talk about it, yeah.
I will move to approve the development agreement relating to the property at 1017 3rd Street.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alderperson Shore. Okay, comments. Mary Ann, you had a comment?
Mary Ann Leszewski, 1209 Wisconsin Street. I agree with Alder Nebel that building apartments beyond our need will affect our tax base as properties depreciate from vacancies, these finances are on topic when we speak about rentals and this issue tonight. While my comments too are not about dollars and cents and financial figures, in keeping with your finance committee, they are more observations of the fiscal operations, especially regarding occupancy and income and the day-to-day fiscal feasibility of this whole proposal. The ambitious size of this project and the radically reduced parking is concerning and has come up several times already. A rental agent will be needing to rent over 100 units without available on-site parking. Already, a tenant needs to qualify for many criteria to rent an apartment, including rental history, income, work history, credit rating, criminal background check, smoking, pets, and now it will need to be someone without a vehicle or able to navigate parking off-site. A rental agent may also need to eliminate any with walking limitations or women and seniors for night security reasons. Any nurse, waitress, factory worker who would need to walk a block or two after working a second shift and arriving home after midnight knows there's a certain amount of danger after these hours. The same is for anyone after just an evening out, or say after bar time, or shopping till 9 o'clock. For 4 months, it's dark after 5 p.m. Even in daylight, will they be willing to make 2 trips across Center Point Drive to carry in groceries, let alone during 4 months of ice and snow? As a landlord, I routinely have to turn away couples or roommates with 2 vehicles. When assigning parking spaces, will the couples and roommates who apply be given 2 spaces for 1 apartment, even further reducing the parking spaces? Or will the agent need to screen for only 1 resident per unit? Many unmarried couples are living together today, and many apartments are occupied by 2. I often need to take 6 to 10 inquiries for an apartment before I can even find a prospective qualified tenant to schedule a showing, and that doesn't guarantee they'll take it. You don't see offers of 1 month free rent because leasing is so easy. A rental agent will also need to compete with possibly 300 proposed apartments, new ones that are planned for this immediate area. Are there 100 free parking spaces across Center Point Drive after Great Lakes, Midstate, and Cobblestone occupy the lots? I drove through there this morning. At 10 o'clock, there were 10 open parking spaces between the front and the back of these properties. As far as the Crosby lot, it's heavily used for Wednesday band concerts. In the summer, it gets filled up, and numerous other Piffner Park activities from spring to fall when there's gatherings. It's empty this morning on a cold winter's day, but 6-7 months out of the year, Crosby lot is heavily used. And asking tenants to park more than 2 blocks away would be a serious business gamble. You're not going to get them. 211 units with maybe 250 tenants will have friends, guests, and family coming to see them. Where will they park? Not everybody is 26 years old. It is no safer for them to park after dark and in the winter. My 70-year-old friends may hesitate even coming to see me if I live there. Half of them have new hips and knees and don't want to be walking in the winter. Yet there's a lot of talk about seniors who would like to downsize and live here. Will there be parking spaces for guests on site? Or will they all have to park on Portage Street, which probably has 10 spaces? Why is it suddenly okay for this business to use 17 on-street parking spaces overnight? How many homeowners and businesses will then ask for the same allowance to be fair? Where do the vehicles go when the streets need plowing by day or night on Center Point Drive for these 17 spaces? Is the retail customer for these retail stores and the owner of these retail stores, do they have parking included in the 117 spaces that are on site? What plans are there for snow storage on this site? Like the Grant School site, we are allowing changes in 4 different setback standards that were put in place to assure that we have good planning and design in our communities. Like so many plans, it's another squeezing in of something as high and as many units as possible, with half of the parking removed, and then using our city land and street spaces for their needed parking to maximize their greatest return, because then they can build more apartments on the site. Sometimes it feels like between here and Grant School, we were squeezing 60 pounds of potatoes in a 40-pound bag. And this isn't the first time. What this lot really needs is a circle of 1,000 square foot, 1-story duplexes with garages, patios, and a common use building in the middle for seniors to age in place and have convenient access to downtown Pfiffner Park. It would be a wonderful place for retirees or condos. I've never heard so much nefarious talk in defending the extreme parking cutback. The developer said, quote, "The street parallel parking was described as providing life to the street as people are entering and exiting vehicles." So this is a plus. The developer continues, "We develop with people in mind, not the car, how they are going to interact with the buildings, the city, and the first floor. We don't want to continue the ill effects of putting cars first and people second. Innovations in transportation are going to take over. Driving negatively impacts health. It is short-sighted to add significant cost to parking and reduce green space for a piecemeal need that will diminish over time." He continues, "The development may be more suited for those who do not have cars. We de-emphasize the car to create a comfortable, safe place for people to live." One of their strongest arguments for the plan, after doing local research, is, quote, "because the people of Stevens Point love nature," unquote. I'm not convinced that the concern is how much green space is preserved with less parking, but rather how many units can be squeezed in. I know there's encouragement for less dependence on vehicles, but you only have to look at the Spash, Pacelli lots to see how even high school students need vehicles for school and to get to work, as well as most college students having vehicles today. While 20 years from now we may see greater changes in vehicle use, these units need to be rented by 2020. Some communities may never be able to introduce the mass transit that the developers benefited from when they had projects in Santa Cruz, West Hollywood, California, Copenhagen, Denmark. That they aren't Stevens Point. They aren't in the Midwest. They have huge mass transit facilities designed already. In this practical Midwest, tenants need a reliable way to show up on time for work every day of the year in order to keep their jobs and paying their rent. When Vanderwall Associates met recently with over 100 local citizens at the Midstate School here to discuss local planning, they took a poll of how many people drove to that meeting, and there was 88% out of about 125 people of the attendings drove to the site. I think if we had a show of hands tonight of how many arrived here by driving, I trust it would be the same. Madison, with its extensive on-street bike lanes, only have 5% who are dedicated all-weather bicyclists. Even Trevor Rourke, our biggest advocate and enthusiast for biking, stated, "You may find it hard to believe that this plan is going to work," unquote. I think he was identifying many serious doubts that we all have about it. When I questioned the developer about concerns about the vacancies that will occur in the existing units in Stevens Point, if you put a new tenant in one of these, our census doesn't grow, you turn a light off in another apartment, the developer stated that this plan would help existing rent rates to be able to increase to match the rates at this new development. Quite the contrary. If we have an oversupply of units in this community, it'll reduce our rental rates. He also said maybe existing units need to do upgrades. By the time we pay for our own land, 100% of our own taxes, we cannot afford new cherry cabinets and stainless steel appliances like those who get free land and millions of dollars of incentives. It's not an even playing field. Every business has poor performers, but the many apartment owners that I know work very hard to provide good homes for their tenants. Many operate on a small scale and will be hurt if they have to operate on an uneven playing field and have to take on permanent vacancies in their property and reduced rents. Then we may begin to see reduced maintenance on properties and owners who will be struggling and eventually lead to the depreciation of their properties if their income goes down. So it won't increase the tax base in the community if these others depreciate. Existing landlords have been told in this town that we should accept all these new apartment plans because it encourages a growing number of potential customers in working for the downtown business area. Well, this is not their responsibility. What are there plans for an on-site manager for this potentially dense mixed-age complex? Is the lot part of the incentive for the package? Did I read tonight that it's being sold for $1? These generous incentives are also contrary to the 2015 discussions we had during the mayoral race that we were only going to use TIF funding for significant job creation. And fortunately, we don't have any brownfields, and it wasn't going to be used for housing. In conclusion, there just are so many questions and solutions that need to be addressed before this proposal goes forward. It's going to council this week, I understand. I am accustomed to plans being much more fleshed out. We don't have a whole lot of details about it. I guess we're just assuming the inspection department will ensure that all ordinances are enforced and designs, and I don't think an empty lot is the worst thing for us to have in Stevens Point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Should I ask, Michael, do you want to address any of her little concerns or any part of them? Or I don't think it's necessary, but I don't have any questions, no.
I would think maybe let anybody else who wants to speak, and then if there are.
Oh, yeah, is there anybody else who, from the audience, to speak on the motion that's on the floor? No. Seeing none, we'll call for the motion. All in favor of the motion to approve the development agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. And this will be going before the council, full council next Monday. Okay, next item on the agenda is the payment of the claims. Everybody walked through them all and highlighted everything and.
Yes, I have some questions.
Sure. Go ahead.
On page, it would be page 30, actually, of the entire document. And it starts actually with, and I think we've talked about this before, but I just want to affirm this.
There's no 30.
Do you have it of the claims?
On the claims, I guess I'm just using the packet number, page
Okay.
1 of the claims.
Oh,
So,
okay.
sorry,
Page
I'm looking at the entire
That'd be
packet.
the first one. That would be the first.
Page 1. And
Oh, where are we now? Page 1?
Page 1.
Sure.
So, if I recall correctly, Corey, we get sort of a reward for using our credit cards, our collective credit cards for all of the departments. and I should have probably checked the budget, but it was easier for me to ask you, about how much is that annually, and does that go into the general fund? Or at least, what's the percentage that comes back to the city for the use of the debit cards, or, not debit cards, credit cards? And should we be using it more frequently as a means of getting cash back?
Sure. So the percentage, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's around
Sure.
1.5%.
Okay.
Ish. It does go into the general fund, and we have, that is something that, we have discussed as far as trying to pay as many invoices as we can with credit cards if the vendor accepts credit
Accepts them.
cards. Yeah.
Thank you. The other one is for, and I think this is on page 9, it was an amount of money paid to the Bolesky Brothers for ash removal. What kind of ash? Was it ash trees?
I
Okay.
believe, yeah.
I know, there's just such a little space there to write down the description. I'm like, ash, we having a
the ash borers go out.
Yeah, are we having a big
Yeah.
bonfire or something? Okay. I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got questions for? I'm questioning,
Okay, which page?
in our budget
11?
for, well, it's on another page too. In our budget for expenses at the police department, they're rated at $35,000 a year for whatever they were doing there. But now I see Pulaski and Sons are doing the plowing to the tune of almost $800 right now. Was that included in that budget figure for maintenance on that building? Don't we have plow trucks?
Okay, so I guess we do have a budget for the police department for contracted services. I believe that's where it typically would get charged to for the police facility. There are several parking lots that we contract out, so this isn't the only one. There are also some downtown.
What city owns this building?
The city owns those parking lots.
This is all Parks Department parking, isn't it?
Yeah, why doesn't the Parks do
This is
it?
all Sorry. I'm being a troll.
Sure.
Sorry.
I'm just curious, but it is in
Yeah.
the budget.
It is.
That was my question.
Yep, it is, and that's something that we did plan on as far as using the facility here, and when they moved to the facility here, that we would need to find a way to have the snow plowed.
Just a quick note in that regard. The reason that you're seeing that now is because we formerly had an agreement with Ministry Ascension, to park here during their construction. And part of that deal was that they would take care of the snow removal. But basically, the agreement ended.
Oh, so you're honoring their contract? that they have with Pulaski. Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't know if it's that we're honoring their contract, but it's something that we used to have a deal where Ascension took care of it. And now that we don't have that deal anymore, now we have to find a way to do it.
Okay, but we won't use our trucks.
I mean, that's a discussion that,
Okay, not at this time. Thank you. I'm looking for motion to approve the claims.
So moved.
By
Second.
Alderperson Morrow, seconded by?
Yep. Claims paid.
Yes.
As we've been taught to say.
Yes.
All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, item 7. We need to adjourn into closed session approximately 8 o'clock. Oh, not too bad, but it's 8:27.
That's not too bad.
Beehives.
Beehives, yes.
Pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 9185, delivering, negotiating, the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public businesses, whenever competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session. Wisconsin statutes conferring with legal counsel the governmental body which is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which is likely to become involved on the following. There's 3 items here. Item A is negotiating terms of development agreement relating to the possible TIF project District 9. B, consideration of legal options for non-performance of contract Architects Groups Limited, Edgewater Manor Architectural Design Services. Item C, consideration of legal options for non-payment of contractual obligated payment in lieu of taxes. This is a Clam Lake Impact
7. Impact 7, and then John Slabby Villa.
Villa. Okay, so do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Person Johnson. We'll take the roll.
Morrow.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Shore.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Zelinski.
Aye.